watching Good Morning Britain. Let's have a look at those front pages of the newspapers now. Most focus on Prince Andrew's demand for a trial before a jury in the civil case against him in New York, as we focus on already this morning.
That's the Mirror, leading on reports that he tried to get claims by Virginia Giuffre thrown out, but insisted he would see her in court if the bid fails. Here's the Express for you. Andrew shock. I want jury trials, so says the Express.
The Mail pictures Prince Andrew, but leads on a story about Tory MPs urging Boris Johnson to rethink the national insurance hike amid what it calls wavering support for the Prime Minister's premiership. And the Telegraph also features that story, the warning that the rise in national insurance contributions that are planned for April will push up prices, and pictures Boris Johnson returning to Downing Street following a stormy PMQs in Parliament. We're going to talk about that a bit later on.
Yeah, we're joined in the studio by former Labour Party advisor Aisha Hazarika, political sketch writer for The Times, Quentin Letts. Lovely to have you both with us. And we have former Assistant United States Attorney Mitchell Epner live in New York for us as well. Good morning to you, Mitchell. Thank you for joining us. So, look, we're all sort of reeling at the move by the Duke of York, who has demanded this trial, a trial by jury in this civil sexual assault case that's been brought by Virginia Giuffre. I think previously we were expecting, the legal experts had sort of suggested that there's going to be a settlement, that the last thing he'd want to do is actually go to court and face Virginia Giuffre. So it feels like quite a move, this, by Prince Andrew. What did you make of it?
So I think that the British press is confused by boilerplate standard language here. The demand for a jury is simply a standard thing that Prince Andrew had to do in order to guarantee that if Virginia Giuffre decided to drop her jury demand and agree to have the case tried by the judge, who has shown enormous antipathy towards Prince Andrew's attorneys, that Prince Andrew would not be stuck in front of that judge. In no way, shape, or form does the phrase of a demand for a jury trial preclude an eventual settlement. And anybody who is reading that into this simply does not understand the U.S. legal system.
Okay. I suppose what it was is less maybe to do with the idea of a settlement, but more to do with the advice he's been given. I mean, he, you may, I'm sure, be aware, gave a now rather notorious interview with the BBC on Newsnight, which we're told he wanted to do to state his case. And I guess it's more his emotional position and the emotional position of his advisors as to whether he would want to stand up in front of, 12 good men and true and sort of clear his name.
So, Kate, I understand what you're saying. I don't think that's the opportunity that's in front of him. I think that if he goes to trial, he will either lose by having a verdict against him, or he will lose because it will be the most Pyrrhic victory in history, because every single bit of dirty laundry he's ever had will be aired out in public.
So despite the language is more a technicality. It's a legal bit of speech. The Duke does not want to be in front of a jury. That's the last thing he wants, but he just had to lodge that as his position at this moment.
Well, I wouldn't presume to know what he wants to do. People often want things that they shouldn't want. But if he's well advised, he wouldn't want to be there.
Right.
OK, let's talk about some of the reasons. So they submitted 11 reasons why they believe the case should be dismissed. And it'd be good to get your legal take on what those reasons are. Miss Giuffre's claims are barred by the doctrine of consent, her own wrongful conduct. What do they mean by that?
OK, so let me take those in reverse order.
OK.
The wrongful conduct falls under the heading of what's called unclean hands. And that is the idea that the plaintiff's conduct has been so abysmal that even if everything that is alleged about Prince Andrew were true, she still would not be entitled as a matter of equity to take anything from this case. And that is a claim that is made to the judge, not to the jury. And specifically what I expect that will be is that Prince Andrew and his advisors will rely upon Virginia Giuffre's admitted actions in bringing other minors into Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking circle. And I am not certain whether or not that will be a successful tactic. I do know it will make the case even uglier. With regard to the consent argument, that is, as an affirmative defense, that's a non-starter because the allegation is that he raped this woman. Rape, by definition, means a lack of consent. There is no world in which he could be found liable by the jury on the basis of rape and then have the judge clear him on the basis of consent. The two are mutually exclusive. He may be able to show the jury, he may be able to show the jury that she did consent, but that would be a jury issue. That would not be an additional defense.
So it's another technical chance to try and raise objections, but not likely to be a successful one, in your view, in that instance. Also, elsewhere, he talks about the photograph, this photograph that we've now all seen of Virginia Giuffre and Prince Andrew together. He's always suggested that he doesn't have specific memory of that. But there's now an odd sentence which says, and I wonder if you could unpick the legalese in this. It says, Prince Andrew's response states that he lacks sufficient information to admit or deny the allegation that there exists photographic evidence of his alleged meeting with Giuffre. I mean, he can't challenge that there exists photographic evidence, is there? Because we just saw it. So what is he trying to say there?
Well, what he's trying to say is nothing. What he's trying to do is, in the American term, kick the can down the road. He does not want to take a position on this yet. As you mentioned before, his BBC interview was disastrous. In that interview, he claimed that this photo was perhaps doctored. His attorneys apparently prevailed upon him not to take that position, but at the same time, he was unwilling to admit that this was an actual authentic photograph. So what he has done instead is claimed not to have sufficient knowledge to know whether or not this is an authentic photograph, which is a very bizarre position to take with regard to a photograph that he himself is pictured in. At some point, he is going to have to take an actual position on this question.
It feels like that photograph could be crucial for both the defence and the prosecution.
Well, I think that it is for the plaintiff the single best asset that she has. There is no good explanation for why a man in his late 30s or early 40s has his arm around a 17-year-old girl who is not a friend, is not a relation, but instead is from, thousands of miles away. And I think that the jurors will be asked to use their common sense that the simplest explanation of why he has his arm around her in this awkward pose, awkward being a euphemism for lecherous, that is the most likely one, that there was something going on there.
Of course, but I suppose, just to be fair, he's reiterated that there was no wrongdoing from his part, Prince Andrew. It could easily be that he was just at a party and someone asked to take a photograph. We all just stand next to people, don't we? So I think...
Kate, I just have to break in there. As a former sex crimes prosecutor, 40-year-old men do not just randomly put their arms around 16 or 17-year-old girls that they do not know, are not related to, and are not the children of friends at random parties. That does not occur.
OK. Mitchell, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you for giving us your thoughts on that this morning. We should reiterate that the Prince vehemently denies any of the allegations that have been levelled against him. It's interesting, Aisha, hearing what Mitchell's saying there about the legalese. Like, we are waking up to the idea that he wants to face trial by jury. And what Mitchell's saying is that's absolutely not the case at all. It's just something that has to be lodged within the American system.
And Lisa Bloom, who is very much working with the other side, has said that Giuffre had wanted a trial by jury anyway. So I do take that point that it's a bit of a red herring.
Well, I suppose what he did say really is that He might not want any of this. He might not certainly want a trial. He might want it all sorted and settled. But he would rather have a trial by jury than simply in front of the judge.
Yeah, because he feels like the calls that the judge has made have not gone through. But I'll tell you what, that is high risk because, as we all know, from probably the interview of our generation in terms of how profoundly bad it was, the idea of him taking the stand will probably bring out his legal team and indeed the Queen and the royal family out in hives because he has not given a good account of himself. And I think if you take a step back, I think the thing that people are just really surprised about is just how appallingly all of this has been handled. You know, he should have just cooperated much earlier in the investigation. Now we've had his team aggressively go after this victim and kind of victim blame and say, you know, make all kind of smears against her. And now we hear ludicrous things like that about the photograph. We've now hearing he's saying he didn't know Ghislaine Maxwell that well. She wasn't that close a friend of his. So it does sound pretty desperate.
Quentin, that quote that Kate just pointed out to Mitchell, Prince Andrew lacks sufficient information to admit or deny the allegation that there exists photographic evidence of his alleged meeting with Giuffre. I mean, it's an extraordinary thing. It feels a little bit like some of the rebukes we've had coming from number 10 about whether they were... just about whether they were or not
very
at party.
Prime Minister, isn't it?
We can neither confirm or deny that you know what I mean? It's
I think Boris makes Prince Andrew look like Demosthenes. Well, no, I think you need to say, first of all, Prince Andrew is not necessarily the world's greatest legal mastermind. And his strategy in the past has been pretty hopeless. So I feel that this whole story, to me, is one of hyperbolised grandeur and hyperbolised scandal. I don't think Prince Andrew is a significant figure. I think he's a minor figure, he's a shallow figure. I think he's got a very tenuous grip on the affections of the British people. So the idea that he really matters is not really
Well, he matters
publicly.
because he's absolutely at the core of the royal family.
No, he's not.
Do matter.
No, he's not.
Well,
he's not.
he might
He's been
not be...
booted out of the royal family, so I don't buy that.
Quentin, well,
and also the idea...
somebody that's grown up
but also,
for 54 years of the royal family, it's only until
I
recently...
don't believe 54 years.
You're good, aren't you? You're good. You don't need a lawyer to win over people. No, you know... until recently, he was part of the royal family.
He's still ninth
he was
in
the
line
Queen's
to the throne.
alleged favourite.
Ninth, exactly. I mean, come on, he's not a significant or serious figure, as he is proving every day. And also the idea of the going into... I've been a New York correspondent. Going into Manhattan courts, I would very much recommend to anybody avoid doing it because you get into this terrible sticky soup of fees and also of strange values. I mean, what we just heard from Mr. Epner about any man who puts an arm around a 17-year-old woman is automatically going to be prey to sex allegations. It's just nuts. I mean, I've put my arm around 17-year-old girls. I don't know if somebody brings out a camera and says,
put a photo.
Geez,
please, could we have a picture?
You all get around like that, don't you? So it's nonsense. The sort of stuff that's said in New York courts.
Hang on a minute. Like, I think the idea that we're just, like, batting all of this off. He is basically sort of denying reality. He is denying that photograph. It doesn't look like they're at a party with lots of other people. Just that photo. There is something very quite intimate about that photograph. The way he's standing, there's not lots of other people. They're not dressed in sort of formal attire. And Quentin,
I do think... You should join the prosecution team.
Well, it's not about...
I don't believe it.
It's about literally using your eyes and your brain and your common sense. But I feel like you're arguing that night is day. This guy is the son of the Queen, and you're like, he's just a nobody. Nobody cares about this.
Well, I think he is now.
The royal
now, but that's the point.
He's a persona non grata because he's been caught up in all this business. You cannot deny that he is not a significant figure. He's the favourite son of our Queen, who we love, and we fund the royal family as well.
Do we have any affection for Prince Andrew?
Well, listen, I don't know what the...
Have we done for some years? The idea he's been presented.
I don't know what you or I feel, but
as a matter of high state politics.
No, he's been presented as a core member of the royal family.
How we feel towards Prince Andrew, he is still a member of the royal family, no matter how distant or important he is, and what happens to him and where he is and what's in. Does impact on the Queen and the royal...
It's a sort of Hello magazine approach to news.
Quentin, I'm afraid this just shows how absolutely out of touch... Well, you are out of touch on this, I'm afraid, because for most people, it would be absolutely horrifying to think that the son of the Queen was involved in pretty serious allegations of sexual
that's
abuse,
what I don't-
and you're kind of
I don't
batting it
think
off,
it
saying,
is
"Oh,
that serious."
he's not." You don't think
No,
it's
I
that
don't
serious?
think it is.
You don't
He
think
was
it's
accused
you
of
do
rape.
I
not
think there's
it's
hyperbolised scandal around
You don't
this.
think it's serious that he is involved with probably one of the most prolific paedophiles of our generation?
No, because I don't think you're proving. I don't think you're
So
proving.
you don't think Jeffrey Epstein was a prolific paedophile?
No, I
And-
think
and-
that I do
and
think
Prince
that, but I
Andrew
don't
was-
think.
Prince Andrew
No.
was friends with him and
Aisha,
hanging out with him.
let me say something, for goodness sake. You're just screaming at me. I think what you're failing to struggle to prove here is there is a connection between Prince Andrew and what that man was getting up to.
They were friends. They were
Well,
hanging out.
No, they were acquainted.
Well, look, we haven't had the case, have we yet? So there is
No.
no proven connection, and Prince Andrew denies it, of course. But I think what Aisha's reacting to is you seem to think that the actual whole issue wasn't important and didn't have impact on the British people. Because I think Prince Andrew involved being
It's on the
alleged
front
of
page
something
most
like
of the
that.
newspapers
Yeah, I know.
today.
Well,
I mean, but the point is that the editors of these newspapers feel it's big enough news and important enough for them to lead on their newspaper.
That's why I would make a terrible editor of a newspaper.
Well, also,
That could be the crux here.
Really would.
He's a member of the royal family.
The story bores me, Richard.
OK, oh, so it bores you. So
That's a
but
different thing.
Is that because you're not particularly concerned about the image of the royal family?
No, not madly. I'm a monarchist, but I'm not a gushing royalist.
And you don't feel at all bothered about all the women and the girls that have been abused by Jeffrey Epstein and many other powerful men?
I think
Maxwell.
some of the claims have been overwritten here.
OK, we're going to leave that story where it is right now. Hopefully, when we come back, we'll have something that Quentin is more invested in. Certainly at the heart of politics, of course.
Prince, they need to invest in you as part of their team. Get you out of his PR.
I'm no fan of Prince.
Aisha and Quentin are staying where they are. We're also going to be joined by Conservative councillor Claire Pearsall. She's going to be joining our panel after it's revealed that Boris Johnson